Hey, it's not your fault or mine, but together we can do something about it. See you soon.
Voices of humanity, we need to hear your voices. We need to hear your voices.
Hey, it's Sandra McKechnie here again. Welcome, a very warm welcome. Welcome to PR Connections Radio, the voice of humanity. prconnectionsradio.com, and my show is the Voices of Humanity. And it's a pleasure for me to be your host, Sandra McKechnie. This show is all around double consciousness, two streams of thought, two social identities, has everything to do, all the intersections, the plethora of intersections that we're going to cover going forward. And you've seen some of our shows in the past. And so thank you for your support. Please subscribe, and share. The content is great. I have another great guest for you today. And I just wanted to let you know that I am also a certified life coach. I'm doing cultural sensitivity and awareness trainings. And in the same niche, I also coach. It's really important work. It is not like a want, it is a need. And the guest that I have coming in right now she's a beautiful guest. She works with me. Hey, Marcia. Yay. She's my administrator, and she presents as well. She's my co-facilitator administrator, and we do them together. We've been doing it for 5 years. Double consciousness, two streams of thought, two social identities, having everything to do to what happened in the time warp, 21st century, 20, 19, 18, 17, our blacks, our indigenous brothers and sisters, First Nation, Native Americans, has everything to do with our Latinx, people that have gone through a lot through the ages, through the time warp. So we do this because it really is a need, not a want. We're concerned about how we show up when we come back through that time warp, right? Say we're in the 17th century, we come back 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. How are we showing up? And why are we showing up the way we show up with our biases? And what does the dominant group look like, and what does that mean anyway? We're going to get into a few things. This lady's amazing. She means a lot to me. I've known her for a long time. We've been doing this for about 5 years. We thought it was over, right? But we went online. We just thought we were done for a bit, and then I'm going to read a little bit about her for you. Marcia's bio. Marcia Shelton is passionate about family, community, and social justice. As a director in the nonprofit social services sector, Marcia knows firsthand about the multiple barriers marginalized individuals and families face on a daily basis. Understatement, believe me, she does. Having a deep love for the Black and Indigenous community, she continues to be proactive in addressing systems of oppression. Her desire is to see families and communities healed, restored, reunited, and empowered. Marcia strongly believes that healthy families are the foundation to healthy and thriving communities. We are here because we want to give you some content. We want to touch lives, move hearts to change, remembering it is not your fault or mine. We weren't there, but we're here, and things have been passed to us. And how are we showing up in the 21st century, Mars? We are going to get into it. There we go. I got my questions on the side here.
Okay, great.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you for having me join you on Voice of Humanity, Sandra. It's a
My
pleasure.
pleasure.
I feel honored and I feel humbled at the same time.
Thank you, hon. All right, so we've been doing this. We do it online, and Marcia's she's actually the catalyst, the one that just I think I was talking about it a lot. And anyway, she made the way through her. I'm here, but she's going to let you know a little bit more about that. Okay. So Marcia, tell them a little bit more about how we started and why we're collaborating and how that looks.
Well, first of all, Sandra and I, as you know, we go back a long way, back in college days to be exact. When we first started out, and I'm amazed at how we've transformed in our friendship. So there was a gap, 20 years gap.
20-year gap.
Year.
That's a little gap.
Yeah, right. And as you know, people life changes, transitions happen. But what I'd like you to walk away with, knowing that Sandra and I even had a gap, is that relationships could be restored if they're united for a purpose. And Sandra
Absolutely.
and I
Thank
have
God.
been united for a purpose. And
Yeah.
this purpose became part of our journey. I'm a woman of faith, so it became part of Sandra's journey of self-discovery. Myself, I've always been aware of my blackness, but it's been heightened since I've met Sandra, and she started to reignite that within my life. When she started to talk about double
Same here.
consciousness, she had a little home tryout, so to speak, where we
Beta
gathered a
test.
few, yeah, gathered a few people to do her presentation to share her knowledge. And I was deeply moved. Now, you have to know something about Sandra. She's probably shared with you in past um, podcasts, is that Sandra was not as awakened as I was, but at the same token, I was not as awake as I am now. And when I heard Sandra's delivery, I thought, no, this, it was riveting, it was thought provoking, and I said, girl, you've got to do this again. And because of where I work, and as you know, Sandra mentioned, I support families. I thought this would be good. Our Black families need to hear this, because if you don't know where you're coming from, it's going to be
Mm.
hard to know where you're going. And that's where double consciousness was birthed, right? Is this was a birth of her nation, her dream, her awakening, and also mine too. So we've been on a tremendous journey of healing, transformation, renewal, um, being aware of our own biases. And so that's where we are now. Double consciousness, we launched it at my workplace.
Yeah.
The very
Yeah.
first Saturday was focused on families. We were nervous, didn't know what to expect. We promoted
Yes.
it. Um, and with anything new, there's areas where you can change. But the very first one, we had 45 families and even community agencies come and attend, and they
Mm.
were blown away. It was a full day event. It was emotionally draining, but it was worth it. And
Mm.
the feedback that we got only affirmed that this is a need. It's a gap. And it's not like any other cultural training, sensitivity training that we've had. You sit in a room and you just hear and you run off the same history about, and no disrespect intended, because we need to honor our Black men that paved the way, our Black women that paved the way, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman,
Mhm.
Nat
Mhm.
Turner, Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. We need to honor them, and constantly, but there was more to it. There's
Mm.
everyday life situations. We're all in the fight. We're all in the struggle. So it was in that there was an awakening, and we were prompted by community. We need this. You got to do it again. And then from there, we started to do it twice a year. Then it moved out to 3 times and 4 times a year. And
Wonderful. Good
minimum
stuff.
registration was 65, minimum 65 people. And it
Mhm.
moved from working with the community to professionals attending,
Yes.
psychologists, social
Absolutely.
workers,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
doctors, people in the healthcare, in the corporate world started to attend, and we were just blown away, blown
Yes,
away.
absolutely,
Mhm,
absolutely. I love it. I love it. I love it. And we continue to, and what's beautiful, it's like coaching to me in a way, because we don't coach because we're giving content, and
mhm,
it's a bit of that too, because we both participate. March delivers, I deliver. And but people actually come here. Sometimes the cameras are off and people are feeling like, "Ugh, what are we going to be doing?
mhm, mhm,
Some people had to come because they have to, because they were sent by their workplaces and different things. But this training is definitely, we love the symbolic achievements, Rosa Parks Boulevard and Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard, we're all up and we've got the Black president, and those are great.
mhm,
But we go much deeper as to why certain groups, especially because we stay in our lane,
mhm,
Blacks, excuse the bywords, why we show up the way we do in the 21st century. We get into
mhm,
economic castration, academic, social castration, just all of the disenfranchisement of a group of people. And there's a number of other peoples, especially our Indigenous brothers and sisters, who's this lady's very passionate about, that are on par with, in many areas, with us. So Mars, I'm going to hear from you.
mhm,
Okay, so what does double consciousness mean to you? And how does it show up in your life? How does that look? This two streams of thought, this
Mhm.
two social identities. And by the way, audience, that little gap has everything to do with the struggle, those that were assimilated back in the
Mhm.
time warp,
Mhm.
21st century, 20, 19, 18, 17, and how when they come home, what did we bring? What did blacks bring? What did whites bring? How did that look? And we talk about the dominant group and who's showing up how, and how can we heal? Remembering it's not your fault or mine, but together we can do
Mhm.
something about it. So Mars, how does this show up, do you think, in your life? I know you got stories too, but in your personal life, how does it show up? And then we'll go to how does it show up at work to you?
Very good question, and we could probably spend a whole show on that.
Yeah, we
So
might have to book again. I can
I
feel it.
will just think of, you know, think of because I know you and I, when we get going, we can spend several hours talking. But I would say that I would frame it around my own lived experience around racism and being born and raised in Canada with West Indian parents. Um, and I would say that double consciousness, you don't realize that you're operating in it until you start to unpack some things, things that trigger you, or maybe why do you respond a certain way when certain people talk to you or show up in a room, or you start to see how you are around your own people, and then you change behaviors when you're around the dominant race.
Right.
And that's hard to, especially for myself, because I always see myself as authentic and transparent, and but you lack authenticity when you don't know who you are. And so
Mhm,
for me, it's framed around how I viewed myself, how
mhm.
I view myself within the context of my cultural identity, being a first generation Black Canadian. Um, it's around how I viewed myself within my education system, because I went to school, public school. First of all, I was the only Black. We were the only Black family in the school, so that also had an impact psychologically. But you don't aren't aware of these things because those conversations never. We weren't in those conversations back then. So double consciousness, two streams of thought, two social identities, you don't even recognize that you're being formed into those two streams of thoughts
True.
and two identities
So true.
until we started to unpack and recognize and have that honest conversation with self and self-reflection and being vulnerable and confronting our own biases even towards our own people and towards ourselves, right? That self-love
Absolutely.
piece. So how that show up, it affected, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a woman of faith, so it affected, obviously it's going to affect your biblical view, the
Mhm,
narrative,
mhm,
right? With
mhm,
no disrespect, the white Jesus
mhm,
as a Black
mhm,
woman.
mhm.
It affected my worldview, how we are
Absolutely.
seen as a people in media, the movies that I watch, the music we listen to, right? And even though
Mhm.
we had our R&B and we had our Grandmaster Flash and Bootsy Collins, all of those those that
Yeah.
music back then. I'm dating myself. However, we still did not really realize how deep seated and how our subconscious was being conditioned, and so it did affect how I showed up, right?
Mars, I'm interjecting because it's hilarious. We were so we really didn't see it because look at the Ten Commandments, Charlton Heston. Like we're
Yes.
like we didn't even think. Wait a minute, the people in that time in that place of the world aren't even
Hmm.
that shade. They're
Yeah.
not even that tone. Like,
Yeah,
so there's
exactly.
some things we were duped on. We're watching it over and over. Ten Commandments.
Hmm.
Anyhow, I just thought I put that in there.
Yes, we can laugh now because we've been awakened, really awakened.
Absolutely. And
Hmm.
I was thinking how there's nothing I thinking how we think of code switching, which is like pretty much under the umbrella, I think, of double consciousness.
Hmm.
Is so code switching is when people are showing up one way in the week. So this is an example. They're showing up and people say you go to work and you're acting white all week and then you're acting black on the weekend. And a lot of people can relate to that kind of
Hmm.
thing. Two streams of thought, two social identities, right? And what that kind of looks like. Um, And yeah, we've nobody told us that that's what we were doing. If you're
Mhm.
assimilated upon trauma via the slave massa, it's just a logical thing that has happened instead of
Correct.
putting all the feeling behind it. You know, you go back in history, 21, 20, 19, 18, back in that time warp, you were assimilated to think a certain way. Like my
Mhm.
friends, one of my friends called me blight, mixture of black and, and white.
I
And
wish you that could be.
and please don't take any offense. This is a logical thing where you are assimilated to think a certain way. We have a friend coming back from India, Aisha. She will be coming back talking about um, the women in the south of India and children, Mars, how badly they're treated because they are dark, you
Mhm,
know?
mhm,
And then another friend of mine from India, her associate was saying that, you know, we were actually assimilated to and, you know, colonized to believe that we are better than you because, you know, you guys are, you know, you're their same tone, but you don't have this nappy hair.
mhm,
So that when we start talking about the reality of this thing, then it's not so like, oh, what are they talking about? This is terrible. Think about
mhm,
what your forefathers have taught you, whatever, wherever you are in the world, China, whether you're Philippines, what have you been taught?
mhm,
And some
mhm,
pseudoscientists came along like Charles von Linnaeus, Johann Blumenbach, and classified us into the races with
mhm.
the darker the skin, the more dehumanized at the bottom of the rung. So
Correct.
Mars, how did that, this is a big topic too, showing how it shows up at work. Like I always, like I said to her the other day, I find if I was going to say something about her, a phrase would be a defender of the weak, because
Mm,
this is what she does. She will take risks to defend those that where there's an overt and obvious injustice. Of course, we're woke, so called, so it's easier to see it.
mhm.
Um, so in your experience, if you can share a little bit about that, how does this show up at on the job as a director?
It's interesting because I've been into both sectors, the corporate world and the nonprofit world.
Mm,
And the dynamics are different within the corporate. So visualize, so I was not in leadership in the corporate world. I was front line, but I saw Black women and men in those positions. But I also saw that now that I'm awakened and I reflect back how they operated, they could not be their authentic self.
mm,
You had to show up in a way that's white, that was made the dominant race comfortable, right? The way you dressed, the way you spoke, keep your emotions in check, know your place. And it's understated. It's not saying that they're deliberately doing it, but it's understated, right? I've watched it within the corporate world. Um, in the nonprofit world, it's different because we are serving the poor. So everybody wants to help, the poor little Black children, the poor little Indigenous people, right? The families that live with poverty, new immigrants. So there's this sense of care, which is legitimate. So I'm not minimizing it, but I want to kind of give a little different perspective around how that looks. Again, that narrative, the great white hope. So a lot of nonprofit organizations that are in marginalized communities,
hmm
they're predominantly, the larger ones that have the money and the influence are predominantly run by the dominant race. You now
mm,
are seeing a lot of, within the past 10 years, you're seeing a rise of grassroots organizations that are founded by Black individuals and Indigenous, right? Different, the minority groups. But before that,
hmm
that was not the case. You
hmm
had to go to the dominant race to help you with your housing, to help you with your employment, to get your counseling, and how it's showing up for myself, the challenges that I've experienced. So I've been in this organization for 12 years. I made a joke with Sandra about that, but I won't. I don't want to say
Go,
anything
because we got to
differently.
kick it out on YouTube. Oh,
Exactly. So, but it was a battle. It
mm,
was a battle. Feeling inadequate, and you really start to see our deficiencies around education. You really start to see our deficiencies around how we show up in meetings when we're being challenged. The effect it has on us physically, the effect it has on our self-esteem and our confidence. And moving into this position, one thing that I've learned, I was at a training with some mainstream banks, prominent banks. I won't say their names,
Mm,
but it was around cultural diversity, equity, and inclusivity, and the focus was on um, the black individuals and why do they not apply for certain roles. And I learned something from that because they did a study. So these are mainstream banks, big prominent banks, and what they've in their study they realized that if a job posting was put up for a director's position within a bank, right,
mm,
it would say you need to have university degree in business, um, bilingual, French as a second language, proficient with Microsoft Office. It will list you all of these things, right? Being able to handle budgets, just all these requirements. What they said that they found in their research is that white men, they wouldn't look at what they don't have on that. Even if they only had two of those criteria, they
mm,
would still apply. They say, ah, what the heck, I'll apply, right?
mhm, mhm,
White women will look at it and say, okay, out of that 15, I have 10 of those criteria. I'm going to apply. A
hmm,
black man will look at it and say, oh, I maybe have, I don't, they shift now. It's not about what they don't have. What they have is like, okay, I don't have five of those items out of that 20, and they
mm,
won't apply. A black
mm.
woman will look and she can have 14 out of the 15, and she'll say, oh, I'm not bilingual, and then won't
Ah,
apply. I was
that's
amazed.
interesting.
We
That's
look at it
really
from a
interesting.
deficit, and
Yes.
they look at from an asset. Well, I have this, I have
Yes.
that. We look at it as, oh, I don't have that, so I'm not going to apply. And I think of myself, I'm a director, and
Yeah.
it rang true because when the job was posted, the job wasn't posted, but we heard about it within our organization. And somebody said to me, Marcy, why didn't you apply? I go, I'm not going to apply. I don't have that experience. I don't even have the education for that. There's no way. I never led a large team like that. And yet, and I had a long list of why I couldn't. But at that time, we were going through a reorganization, and the CEO and the VP at that time came to me, called me in their office, and first thing that I thought, oh no, what did I do wrong? We have
Mm.
been conditioned to think that
Yes.
we are
Yes.
always doing something
Yes.
wrong. We never
Yes.
think we're going to get called in to be congratulated for work well done, or
Yes.
wow,
Yes.
I love your innovation. No, I was in fear and trepidation, racking my brain. Okay, did I say anything to anybody? Did I drop the ball somewhere? When they brought me in the office, I had a little piece of paper and in my hand, and it had a note on it. And by the time the interview was done, because it ended up being an interview, that paper was in little bits because I was a bag of nerves being called into the office, right? And it was to offer me this director position. They were giving it to me.
I know. I just remembered all that when it happened, when you were
Yeah,
talking about, yeah, yeah.
right. So that's
Wow.
how we show up. We show
Mm,
up in a mindset of our deficits, what we think we don't have, as opposed
mhm.
to what we can bring, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's one of the
Yes.
things that I learned, that I in
Mm.
my years of career and from corporate to nonprofit, and it's
It's
really
funny.
challenged me.
It's
Hmm.
funny that you were saying that because I remember, and please, everybody get this video. It's called Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. It's still
Hmm.
on YouTube, and she's out there doing her thing. And I changed because I collided with W.E.B. Du Bois, and Dr. Joy DeGruy at the same time altered my space. My
Hmm.
faith was heightened. And I just, it's an amazing transformation that happened to me, and Mars can contest to that.
Yes.
Um, but one thing she was saying, there was somebody, they were giving out awards to a woman, a white woman, black woman, excuse the bywords. They were sitting in the seat, and both of their sons were getting these awards. So I'm paraphrasing it my way, but you'll get the gist of it. So the white woman was, the black woman, was saying to the white woman, "Wow, look at your son. He's doing well. He's done really great with his degree, and etc." And of course, like any mother, this the white woman was sitting there going, "Oh, I'm so proud," and going on about her son. So then but the white woman looked at the black woman and said, "Well, what about you? Your son's actually getting more than my son. He's doing so great." And the black woman went, "Oh, him. Oh," she was proud, but she said, "Oh, he gets on my nerve. I had to hit him in his head to do his work. Oh, come on. He's
Mhm.
okay." But she's touched on something. This wonderful Dr. Joy DeGruy, she touched on something, and it was that she went back. Like, let's go back in the time warp and see what happens there. 21st century, 20, 19, 18, 17. So Massa is saying, okay, white massa, he's saying to the black slave, he's saying, "Oh, look at your boy. He picking cotton. Look at him. He doing such a good job. You must be proud of him. He doing so good." But my mother said, "No, no, I got to beat him in the morning so bad for him to get out of that field. He's not doing good. He's lazy. He's so
Mm,
lazy. If you're not after him, he's just not." And so she connected the two. Marcia knows this, that she connected, and we come back into the 21st century. And why did that woman, where did that come from? It happens
mhm.
in a lot of our families where
Yeah.
something's going on. Ah, don't mind them. They're just, she all right. They don't, we're not going to be sitting up because we've been taught this. We're not going to, because why? Why did that woman feel so afraid? And of
Mhm,
course, back in the time warp, because why? She doesn't want her son to be sold away. She's saying, "Oh, yeah, he's great. Yeah, he's doing, look at him. Wow, he picks more than the rest. Two twos, he's gone. He's gone the
mhm.
selling block." So
Yes.
there's a lot of things that we water. There's a fear of water we have, and we deal with a lot of stuff when
Mhm.
we look at, even the way our men show up, right? In
So
the
true.
21st century. And these movies, Birth of a Nation's one, you got to watch how they
Mhm,
perpetuate our men as these grimacing, angry, and in this movie, it actually perpetuates the Ku Klux Klan, right? And
mhm.
there's a woman in there, and it's a silent film. And there's a woman in there, and she's just sitting, a white woman, like a cute little girl, just sitting there, a young woman, frolicking in the breeze. And there's a cliff ahead of her, and out from the bush comes this black man, white man in blackface, because we didn't get those roles. And here he comes, and she looks, and she runs toward the cliff, and she throws herself over. and
Mm,
and
yes,
the commentary says it's better for her to have thrown herself to her death than to be raped by a black man
definitely.
when that wasn't even our MO. So there's a lot of things our trainings do. And it's
Yeah.
actually, it changes us, why we will turn against each other sometimes as a group. So when I ask you, Mars, about how this shows up on the job, how much do you think, even though you were more woke than I was in a heartbeat, but how much is double consciousness, because we know what's happened when we finish those trainings, how much has it really affected you in terms of this growth and recognizing certain things even on your job?
Tremendously, it's affected me, and it's my journey within the past year, what I
Hmm.
experienced, and I won't
Sure
get into
do.
details, but it really opened up, and actually it pushed me into starting to have very frank conversations around.
I'm here, don't mind, the camera just went weird.
That's okay. That's what I figured, Sandra. That's why I
Right,
kept going.
these
Okay,
things
don't get
happen.
alarmed. Don't get alarmed. Stay the course. Stay focused.
All right.
Um, how, as a Black woman in leadership, it's
Mm,
interesting how not everybody feels, even though they're friendly with you and you get along with them, but as soon as the power dynamic shifts and you
mm,
become the boss now of your white peers,
mhm,
it's amazing how things shift that I didn't expect to shift. So why didn't I expect it to shift? Because I had a belief that I was that things were different. Why? Because I made them comfortable. I didn't address things that I saw. We were trained to let things roll off our back, dismiss it, suck it up, move on, right? So
mm,
things that I should have addressed, I didn't because okay, we're used to that. We climatized ourselves to racism. We
mhm,
climatized ourselves to certain undertones and statements, right?
mhm,
We became desensitized to them. So when it showed up, we learned to just keep moving. But now, in a director's position and working with marginalized families, I
mm,
had to start to address certain behaviors, right?
mm,
And when I started to address things that I would see that was oppressive, now remember, we're nonprofit working to interrupt the flow of marginalization for Black marginalized families. That's the department mainly that I oversee, right?
okay.
And when I saw some oppression take place, I was brought into a conversation by a community member. And when I addressed it, automatically the disrespect that came up, I was no longer seen as a director. by a
Mm.
subordinate. I was now seen as an angry Black woman,
Hmm.
but
Hello.
not seen as somebody that's doing their job addressing unprofessionalism and biases.
Mhm,
And that
mhm,
created a tension. And it actually silenced and disempowered me to a degree because I didn't get the support that I should have gotten. That's what I'm
mm.
experiencing there. What I've also experienced over my years, even prior to being a director, is there's a lot of programs we offer, right?
Mhm,
Even
mhm,
counseling, but they're not done with a culturally aware lens and understanding where our people are coming from as far as employment. So here, for an example, on an employment lens, we have amazing employment programs, right?
mm.
But the factor that's not considered is that you can have the individual practice their interviews, right? Their interview skills, brush that up. You can dress them up. You can work on their resume. But the factor that was not brought into play was the employer's response when the person shows up and they see that, oh, it's a Black male.
Hmm.
And how many times has somebody with a person of color not gotten a job because of their skin tone? And they
Wow.
never prepared or even talked about those and even prepared properly. Employers, so a lot of the programs are there's incentives for employers if you hire anybody that's in our employment services, right?
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
But you could start to see even in there the disproportionate amount of Black individuals and Indigenous people that were getting hired versus the white or European, right? Um, uh, Brothers and sisters, right?
Mhm, mhm.
That are also marginalized or have low education. So if you have a Black man at the same level as a white male
Yes.
applying for the same position, you're going to see that show up there as well. And those are conversations that we need to have, and we're not having. So now
Absolutely.
that's something that my experiences and the position that I'm in are able to bring them to the table and say, have you considered this? And then counseling. You can't dismiss our trauma. Post traumatic slave syndrome is real. It's
Absolutely.
right. We talk about all the other syndromes,
Mhm, mhm,
FASD,
mhm,
right? Fetal alcohol syndrome. We talk about trauma, right?
mhm.
All of that abuse, domestic abuse, how that shows up, and nobody wants to talk about the trauma around oppression.
And also, we had a lot of groups. Hey, everybody, I'm still here. I don't know what's up with the camera, but the show must go on.
Yes, the
Anyway,
show
you
must
see
go
this
on.
thing pulsating. Anyway,
Your
um,
heartbeat.
that's right. There's other groups that when they stand up and they had reparations, billions of dollars that were given to them, and this is wonderful. This is a good
Mhm.
thing. But when it comes to us starting to say, listen, I guess people are maybe tired of us or talking about this content. It's too much. But when we were talking about it, we said that this is not that long ago. Wasn't it your
No.
grandfather was blind on a plantation?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. My grandfather was born on a plantation, and I was. It's interesting. We know that history, but then when you actually see the document that verifies that,
Right.
like it's surreal. It's like, what? It's that close? That's
Right.
my dad's father.
Yes. That is, yeah,
That
functioning.
is
Yeah.
close,
Yeah, it
right?
is very close. And even the some of the schools, the school system,
Mhm.
desegregation of the school system 1994. Well, people think that was the end of it, but you had said there was a date. I forget when it was. Was it in the 60s, the last one, or the 80s that the last segregated school closed? So it's not that long ago.
It's not that long ago at all, at all. Well,
As to,
think about
yeah.
it. When you think of the states with segregation, right?
Hmm, hmm.
In the 60s. So that's not 60s is not that long ago,
Not at all.
right?
Not
Considering
at
when we were
all.
born, that we were born at the tail end of it. I was
Wow.
born in, 63. That was the tail end of what the segregation, and here in Canada it wasn't the same, mind you, but it was psychologically there,
Right,
right?
right,
It
right.
wasn't physically there, it was psychologically there. right?
And even like I was saying to you one time when I support people in social justice, and one time, we went to it was a real arbitrary situation. I mean, they all are in a way, but this one, and I remembered a lawyer, white lawyer, took me aside and she said, "You know what? Don't mention my name, but this happens a lot." She was just talking about the level of discrimination
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
area of the judicial system, and
Yes.
how horrible that people are treated that are darker. Isn't it silly when we think of the fact that we were duped,
Yeah.
and the fact that these pseudoscientists set us up? This is why this talk is so important, because people genuinely,
Mm-hmm.
audience, genuinely, I know, unintentional, unconscious bias, because you don't mean it unless you have a white hoodie, which those people don't wear those anymore. They wear suits. If you're
Yes.
part of that group, and because there is hatred, let's keep it
Yes.
real out here, for a number of groups out here, right, that are
Mm-hmm.
counted to be minorities or social called marginalized. But I think about just hearing that lawyer say to me, "Don't mention my name." We've got a really great lawyer here, and he is Indian, and that he's at risk because they're afraid he's going to lose his job because he's speaking up against the kind of oppression that's in that sector. And I
Yes.
think to myself, when people say, "Well, we're all good now," well, yeah, but the reality is when you get in those close quarters, Marcia, you know what that's
Mm-hmm.
like when you get
Yes.
behind the doors.
Up close
And
and
I've had to
personal.
I-
Yes.
I've had to put my hand out to see a man, a white man, and he was also big in stature. And I had to put my hand out as he was literally dehumanizing this black woman that I was supporting, one of my sisters. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know her like that, but she's my sister. It was
Yes.
indigenous,
Yes.
whoever it was. I'm in there. I'm fighting for you, and I had to put my hand out to this man and go, "Stop! You're bordering
Mm.
on harassment." And I was so traumatized. I've told you guys the story before. My armpit started to stink because of the trauma. We're
Yeah.
just keeping it real here. Because
Yes.
honestly, that kind of it's almost like a spirit.
It
That kind
is.
of, you know,
I.
it,
It,
it holds you.
it
And
does.
I break bread with my white counterparts. Mars does with hers. But the
Mm-hmm.
reality is, all of us, even us, I've had to look at the way I look at the indigenous peoples.
Yes.
So it runs through everybody. Why we
Everybody.
stay in this lane is because we were categorized at the bottom of the rung. The darker the
Mm-hmm.
skin, the more dehumanized. So that's the lane we stay in. And plus, we have we we have the melanin.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Think of it as for those that have watched track and field, and you have the event with the hurdles, right?
hmm,
The 400-meter hurdle race, right? So you
hmm.
have all these hurdles that you jump over. Well, triple our hurdles in our lane.
Oh
That's
my
what,
goodness. Yeah, we
right?
talk about the
Triple
race.
that. So
Yeah.
we have to run, sprint, and jump over more hurdles in
Yeah.
order to make it to the finish line. And anybody that's run track and have done hurdles, there's a timing, and you have to have a certain amount of space to measure your stride to be able to clear that hurdle properly without knocking it over or tripping yourself. And that is what we've had to do psychologically every day from the time we were birthed into this world. No matter where you fit into this global sphere, right?
hmm
On a
hmm
global scale,
hmm
we've all had to do it. As you share your story, I was thinking of how many times, Sandra, have I called you driving to work, crying, literally, because of being overwhelmed, because I had to do a presentation in front
Yes.
of other executives and
Yes.
feeling my inadequacy and not getting the support, not
Yes.
having the skill set because I was not invested in as much as they were. And I
Yes.
had to, me as a director, I had to learn a lot of things on my own. I didn't have somebody come alongside me and coach me, right? And one of the narratives that I'm constantly hearing, and I had to call it out in my organization, is that we have Black staff that would apply for positions, whether it's coordinator positions, assistant supervisor, manager. And within my peers, I would hear, well, that person, they're really passionate. They're good at what they do. So if we're talking frontline staff that have been there a while, they're good at what they're doing. Now they want to be able to, do better for themselves. And I'll hear, yeah, but, they don't have what it takes to be a supervisor or a manager or a coordinator. And I'm a Black woman and I'm listening and I'm thinking, don't they realize what they're saying, that I'm there? And it makes me question, okay, how are they seeing me? How am I showing up to make them feel that comfortable to talk about my people that way?
hmm
And so there was a scenario that happened when I was hiring for my own department. And I was actually after this young black man. You met him, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I'll just use his first name, Glenn.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I went after to hire him. Now he was applying for another position within the department he was at the time, and I spoke to his manager at that time, and they weren't going to give him the position. He didn't know that, but I knew it. Being a director, I was privy to this information. And I said, well, why? And he go, well, he doesn't have the leadership skills. He doesn't have this. And they rambled. They listed off all of the things. And if you remember earlier, I mentioned about we think from deficit,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
they think, they look at us as a deficit.
Mhm.
They listed all the things that he couldn't do, but I was seeing the things that he could do because I start to shift my thinking, right? And how I see my people, how I see myself. So when I told them that I'm going to offer him a position, and I went and I spoke to him, and what they turned around and did is after they said, why? And I said to them, I told them, this is why. I will invest in him. I'll give him the training, but I know he's going to be phenomenal. They went and offered him more money than what I was able to, and they hired him, and he took the position. I was so hurt. I was hurt
Mm.
by that because it was kind of devious. You weren't going to hire him until I identified his value.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I've heard that narrative over and over again. Every black person that's applied for a position since I've been in that role, my role, have been told that no, you don't have the experience, you don't have the skill set. You're passionate about what you're doing. I love your energy, but you don't have what it takes. And I had to now interrupt that conversation.
I think it's amazing. You've interrupted a lot.
Mhm.
Because there are those people that come through, and
Mhm.
sometimes you will count to 10 because you want to give them an opportunity, and you labor. I have seen you labor on it, like you're laboring on a soul, like just
Mhm.
laboring. Why wouldn't I hire them? And okay, so do they have this? Do they have that? Maybe they don't have that, but that's not going to be hard. Just going over it. That's not hard for them
Mhm.
to learn. Or maybe I find I say a defender of the week, and I love what we do in double consciousness. Okay,
Mhm.
in that we've there's so much breakthroughs when we're looking at bias in double consciousness. People
Right.
are amazed at seriously, people are amazed because they're realizing it's in me. I always use that
Yes.
movie Alien, um where you realize the thing is still in the capsule. It's
Yes.
killed that little girl in the capsule. It came with us back to earth.
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
it's with us. And when people actually, there was one gentleman on our show that he recognized his bias, and he went, oh my gosh. And then he said, but I see this in my son. I see this in my son. And there was this moment of silence because he was getting very woke. he,
Yes.
he
Yes.
was becoming aware of his unawareness, you know
Mm.
and he just kind of went, oh my gosh. And it was this kind of a silence. I don't know if you remember that time. And it was sort of like he said,
Yes.
I guess, like, I'm passing it on to him. I'm passing things on to my son.
Son,
And
yes.
it's when we get that awakening, because we're all great,
Mm.
upstanding citizens and people are doing well, but we all have this way we look at each other as with our
Yes.
biases. It's like that telephone thing. I always say it on the show. You whisper something, and this stereotype, by the time it gets to the 30th person, the telephone game, it's totally distorted or total
Yes.
fabrication.
Exactly.
So these are the things when people think we're just tripping, or we're just, oh, come on, we're all good, aren't we? Well, if
Mhm.
you're passing things on, if I look like great somebody, people are always telling me I look like my aunt Sheila, and my aunt, not Sheila, but Auntie Cynthia. I look like my Auntie Cynthia. She got the
Mhm.
big hips, and she got, so I look like her, and they're telling me all this, and you act like so and so. Well, think about that when we say that.
Mhm.
Things are passed on.
That's
That's why we're
fine.
seeing ourselves in ourselves in each.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that to me is a sure sign when we get on these trainings and people are so emotional. We
Mhm.
had somebody break down once, and we have social workers there, and just all the moments that people are going, oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
remember I said to you, a woman pulled me to the side and she said, oh my goodness, I want my children. She was married to a white man, a black girl, black sister. She's married to a white man. She said, I want my children to marry black. And I said, hun, she was serious. She was so moved because
Mm-hmm.
there was stuff she did not get in school. You and I didn't get
Yes.
into school. So then we start to
Exactly.
change, and it takes a
Mm-hmm.
minute to just, settle with this stuff, Mars.
It's true. So even as you were speaking, I was thinking, in order to, you can change laws, you can change structures around institutional racism and structural racism, right? But the piece that is the hardest to do is to change the mindsets of those that are actually implementing and working in those systems,
Hmm.
right? So laws have changed, segregation has ended, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But psychologically, perception is still there. So
Yes.
it's a matter of dismantling that. That is where the work lies, right?
Hmm.
Um, Even within ourselves, our conditioning, our social conditioning that we've been taught, what we've seen on TV, what we've heard in history books,
Yeah.
right? Or what we didn't hear in history books or
Mm.
in our history classes, what we've learned about our biological makeup, right? The
Wow.
psychological castration, the pathologizing of Black bodies, all of these are because of what? Systems. So now the systems are aware,
Hmm.
but the people that are still operating in those systems, prime example, child welfare system, they
Okay.
have, that's what we fight for, the stabilizing of our families, the reunification, the decreasing the amount of Black children and Indigenous children being brought into care that are separated from their families. Why? Because they're in poverty. Poverty does not determine the quality of a parent. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Poverty undermines the ability to parent well. It doesn't determine a parent's skill, right? If you as a parent don't have the income, but you desire to feed your children 3 square healthy meals a day, doesn't mean that you're not a good parent if you can't, because you have to rely on a food bank that doesn't
Right.
even have culturally appropriate food,
Right.
right?
Right.
And a lot of the times expired food, but that's what you have to give. And you're only allowed to go to the food bank once every 2 weeks, but you have 4 children that are growing. All right. Is that
Hmm.
saying that
Hmm.
you're not a good parent? No. But the child welfare system, a teacher will call in and say, hey, this is within the educational system, right? A teacher will call and say, oh, call child welfare. There's a parent, the child is coming to school with a patty and a box juice. That's not nutritional. First of all, you've got a stereotype from somebody that doesn't understand. A patty's not any different than Lunchables. Probably
Yeah,
patty has
true.
more nutritional value than Lunchables,
Probably.
right?
Ah,
But they
yes.
won't call you won't call on that white family that sends their child with Lunchables, but you'll call child welfare to come and check out this parent with the patty and juice, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Why? It's not the institution itself that created that. It's the the person with the power within the institution that has to also change. So as we talk about shifting, it's the people within that organization. So laws have changed, but the people are not changing with the laws necessarily.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
So
So
those unconstitutionalized policies and acts, they're not facts. So even if people stop them, it's like you can't go to people and go, stop treating them like that, slapping them on the
exactly.
hand. It doesn't work.
Or
It's
looking
in
at
our
them the
heart.
way that you're looking at them, right?
Yes, yes.
Dismissing them. Yes. Right?
Wow. Yeah, this is big stuff. And I
It's
would love,
a lot
I
of
mean,
layers.
she's here today, but I know she ain't gonna want nobody really to get in touch with her. But unless she you can get in touch with me and I'll get in touch
Yes.
with her. You really can. Okay. I'm still here, everybody. I'm sorry about the camera. I don't know what it is, but this is a good information. And we're gonna have to book you in for real, Mars. Here's another question. So when you ever tell me about moments for you that you actually, you know how we do, things happen to us, but oh no, we file it. Oh my gosh, our stories. I
Hmm.
can think of one I've told a couple of times, but you tell it today. Um, Going to buy a home. But there are these stories that we may meet together and share, you know, with our people, and a lot of times we don't share them because we're
Hmm.
taught to pull up ourselves by our bootstraps.
Right.
Shh, don't talk about it. you
Yeah.
know, you know, just quiet. Let's just move along. And
Mm-hmm.
meanwhile, we have this stuff in the back here in the caboose, 21st century, 20, 19, 18, 17, way back. We've got this stuff that is a part of us that we don't get to acknowledge. And
Mm-hmm.
I just wondered, in your life, when you think of a couple of stories or something, can you give us a moment so people, I know people believe us, but things that have happened that caused you to just file it and say, no, it's nothing. No, but I know it's something. you know?
Yes, yes. Well, you alluded to the purchasing of a house, so and you shared that story. Is that okay to share that one? I just
Oh, I
want
need you to share that one
to.
so they
Okay.
know I'm not telling, I'm telling the truth.
So, in my early years of marriage, my husband at the time and myself, our family was growing, and so we were looking for a house. We had an amazing real estate agent, and he took us to a place outside of Toronto, so more like in Pickering. So I'm going to say where that is. It's in Pickering, and we went to go look at this house as a young couple, excited, eager, and this real estate agent, he was phenomenal with us. He was a white man, but very, professional and caring, and really wanting to make sure that we're getting something that we feel good about, but it's not going to put a financial burden on us. So this house we went into, while we were going to, the owner of the home was still there, because a lot of the times the people leave so that you can, freely look through their house and go through their cupboards, that kind of thing, scrutinizing everything. But you don't do that when the homeowner is there. Well, this homeowner was there in their living room. And the way that the house was set up, we were in the hallway, and the real estate agent entered into the living room where this homeowner was.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw that we were people of color, Black people.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, so I'm going to be very direct with what I'm saying, because that's my reality, that's my
Right.
experience,
Yeah.
and this is what really happened.
Mm-hmm.
He said to the real estate agent, I'm not selling to niggers.
Mm-hmm.
We were in the hallway, we heard it, we were shocked,
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what to do with that, because this is the 20th century.
Yeah, it is. It was.
I was like, what? Anyways, the real estate agent came out. He turned beet red. He apologized. There you are, Sandra. Good to see your beautiful face again. You're feeling kind of lonely
I
just hearing your
know.
voice in the wilderness.
We'll do what it
Crying
takes,
out.
Mars. Brace yourself. We'll do what it takes. Go
Yes.
ahead.
You keep going. Yeah, so he apologized profusely and said, I'm so sorry. And we departed out of that house. He was horrified. We were in shock. And it's like, I can't believe this has actually happened.
Wow. I know. I
Is
can't even believe it
that's still
sometimes.
happening? That's still allowed?
Yes. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
hatred and the tone in that man's voice.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the thing that our audience needs to know is that
Mhm.
we aren't just saying that we don't want to pull up ourselves by the bootstraps. Well, sometimes we don't have the boots, but
Yeah.
but,
Or the socks. Remember,
other
we have the socks.
And the beautiful thing is, what I love about this is, despite all of this, there's people like Marsh that are in positions, they're movers and shakers of humanity in the voices of humanity. There is some heavy people that are educated and doing some fantastic things out here, our people. And sometimes I think when we use words dehumanize and we use supreme and we use all these words that it may land a little counterproductive, but we don't have to keep repeating those words, but we have the language so we know where we're coming from, right? But the stuff that she has had to go through on her job, the things that I have heard, the things we have experienced, and this is why, if I was to ask you this, Mars, what would you say? If people say, well, we should all be able, if we're going to a therapist, a doctor, clinicians, but a therapist specifically, if our people were going to a therapist, what would you say if somebody said to you, I'm Black and I'm saying to you, Mars, because a lot of people in the field too. Should I go to a white therapist? Can I go to a white therapist?
Good question, Sandra, because I've been in some conversations there as well. There's value in having a Black therapist, somebody that represents you, whether you're an Indigenous person, right, or you're Asian or Black. There is a lot said to have somebody that looks like you, that understands what you've gone through without having you to unpack it fully. Even phrases, terminologies, not having to explain it. So, for example, within the Black community, oh, when we say, "Mom, my parents are going to beat me when I get home," we know that we're not talking about a literal physical beating in the sense of the European, the Western world views that word, right? But a Black therapist understands that. And I'm not saying that there hasn't been abuse and some of the beatings are,
Yes,
and we
yes,
understand where that comes from. But I'm just speaking
yes.
about language of expression is
Mhm,
different,
mhm.
right? So having somebody that you don't have to explain or apologize for a certain language of expression, they know what you mean, can look beyond that, or even look at it and intertwine that into part of your process of healing and self-discovery and unpacking your childhood trauma or whatever, wherever you've got the trauma along the way. For us, it's childhood, and we pile it up as we have our lived experience, depending on where we are actually physically located on this earth, right?
Yes.
Whatever community you're in, whatever, what family contacts you have, right? All of those play a role in how we are shaped and formed and how we deal with our own healing, our journey of healing. One of the things so I think it's important, but there was a counselor that I spoke to, and I said, you need to have some Black counselors. And this is why. And then the response from that professional, she's great, said, well, not all Black people want a Black counselor because they don't feel safe. Granted, yes, there are those cases, but give them the option. Let them choose for themselves as opposed to you making an assumption, right? So
Absolutely.
the situation around that became heated because my team was working with a family and they requested a Black counselor. So we had one Black counselor on the team. So we put in a request to have that counselor. And we were told, no, we cannot request a counselor. We're saying, but the family, well, how do you know? Maybe they need to try a white counselor. How do they know? Well, what are you talking about? Client-centered work. The client knows what they feel comfortable with, right? And so there you go, that dominance within the Eurocentric framework of our healing, you're telling us what is good for us and what is not good for us yet, once again.
So I love this conversation because if like I've gone to a white therapist number of sessions with one of my exes. I'm sorry. One of them. I've only had two. But listen, I've gone to that therapist for marriage counseling. Now that my eyes are opened. And I've closed that disconnect. That's what double consciousness, the trainings do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Closing that disconnect so
The
our people
gap.
can say, it's not that gap. Yes, it's not our fault, but we can do
Yes,
something about it.
got it.
Now, when you are assimilated back in that time, Mark 2120, back in the 17th century, say in the 1600s, you're assimilated to be like massa. You're
Mm-hmm.
assimilated to want that. But at the end of the day, remember, you're not that. You're refuse. You're nothing. So we got to remember that, right? So when I asked you
Mm-hmm.
this question, Mars, so being that the case, what happens if you're on your job, when people are not woke and they go to a counselor, say, at your job, you've kind of alluded to the fact that double consciousness, that whole awakening has helped you just look at everything so differently. If
Yes.
they could hear some of the stories, just look at things differently to support your people, your group, as other
Mm-hmm.
people support their groups, and we celebrate ours as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what does it look like when people aren't a therapist? I go to a therapist and they're sitting there all assimilated by massa. What what will happen to me in terms of I need a clinician?
Yes. So I'm not going to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'm not going to dismiss that there are areas where they do bring healing and they start to have them look at, parent relationship with their children, relationship with their spouse, start to look at certain things. But what will happen is there's a piece of you that still will do the internalized blame. Well, what's wrong with me?
Yeah, yeah.
Because they're not connecting that dot of intergenerational trauma that's been
But Mars,
passed on.
but I mean though, what if it's a black therapist that's not woke?
Oh,
Yeah,
Wow. Yes, that it's very that's a different ball game altogether.
whole different picnic.
So a black therapist, when they're not awakened, can actually cause more trauma in the sense that there's a black therapist or any black professional that hasn't awakened to themselves will just use that same scenario. Just pull up your bootstraps because they've been conditioned to believe that. Look what I did. I worked hard. I was given opportunity. So you need to take opportunity. You need to take ownership and you need to just work harder at it and continue. And you know what I mean? Like in that dialogue. So,
Yes.
so you now are putting that onus back on them again and not recognizing their need to have identification of what your story is. So you've kind of separated your life, your lived experience to where you are now. We're like two different personalities, right? So
Wow.
in counseling, you're coming up as the conditioned, trained professional under the institution of the universities that are dominant with the dominant culture. The training is from that lens, that perspective. You've now taken on that persona. Yes, you have the skin tone, right? But you see how that shows up. I make fun of, saying a blight person. You
Hmm.
see when a black person turns up that doesn't know who they are. They've
Hmm.
assimilated the way they
Hmm.
speak, their expression, and they'll tell you, oh, well, you know what? You need to let that go. That's the past. Now you have opportunities,
Yeah, 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 and it's
right?
conditioning, right? We've
It's
conditioned.
conditioning
We get subliminally seduced by
all the
movies. By
time.
we're all, but that conditioning is come with us and passed on for hundreds of years. So we need to acknowledge that. I think, Marcia,
Yes.
I can't believe
Mhm.
that we're at the end of the show. What happened here now? What
Oh
kind
my
of trouble is
goodness.
this?
We've been past the time.
Isn't that amazing? Okay, so we know we need a rebook because this is important. I certainly hope that you guys enjoyed this time with us. I don't know if "enjoy" is the word, um, but we really want you to know that just count to 10 if you start to make judgments on our conversation. Just make sure not because you have been conditioned to think a certain way about us
Mhm.
and our black brethren. You know what I'm saying? Like some of us think we don't need that help, but it's not your fault or mine. And you don't have to use the word ally. You don't have to use any word. Um, it's not your fault or mine, but together we can do something about it. We didn't start this alone, right? So we
Mhm.
can finish it. Everybody can finish it together. And that's why we love to bring different groups on here. Voices and the faces of humanity. Put your hands together for Marcia Shelton. She did a bang up job. I must
Mhm.
say I'm proud. So I'm sorry I disappeared for a while.
Thank
I don't know
you.
what happened to the camera. Don't ask me. But this has been amazing. And
It's been a
thank you
pleasure.
so much. We've got a little commercial for you. We'll be right back.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Oh, you stay there.
Oh.
Hi there, I'm Sandra McKechnie from Double Consciousness. Double Consciousness looks like this: cultural sensitivity, cultural awareness trainings. I've been doing it for 4 years. We're going into our 5th year, our 41st time on Zoom, and we're doing it. Would love you to join us. The next thing that I do is I'm a certified life coach holding space for clients in the areas of cultural awareness and sensitivity, right? So people that may have a challenge and they just want some space, a consultation, coaching opportunity to unpack implicit racial bias. Everybody's welcome, and we would love to have you in the trainings or book a consultation. And we have a free opportunity, 15 minutes, if you want to have a chat and get to know me and find out where you fit in that. The next thing that I do is I am a host for Voices of Humanity out of prconnectionsradio.com. If you want to be on my podcast and you're a fit, because it does have to fit with the show, has to complement the show and the network, I would love you to get in touch with me. And I'm also, from my heart, and I've always been a singer-songwriter, and I love this stuff. I love the singing. We put it in our trainings, our cultural sensitivity and awareness trainings. So sometimes I just sing just like this. You're all that I want. You are all that I need. And you brought me here when I can't find my way. You're all that I need. And you brought me here to pray. You should hear that with my keyboard player. It's to live for. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that helps you to know who Sandra McKechnie is. Take care. Bye for now. Oh my goodness, I gotta get this weight off. That I look so nice in that video. I gotta do something about this. I know it's COVID weight. Oh, anyhow.
We all have COVID weight. Plus the camera adds weight.
That's right. Hun, it was nice having you. We got to get together and eat something.
It was a joy. Thank you.
We got to go for food. Anyhow, thank you guys so much. What a pleasure. This is Sandra McKechnie, your host, and this is the Voices of Humanity at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. And for sure, we will kick this out on YouTube as soon as we can. And if you do really want to get in touch with Marcia, please, you can I will leave you all the information. All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, Guy Dawson, the CEO that's back there doing all this wonderful stuff. We appreciate you. Bye for now. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.